Hey everyone, my name is Conor Kelly, and welcome to the Solo Sideline podcast. I love sports, specifically the NBA and the NFL. The teams I follow and will talk about here are the Seattle Seahawks, Denver Broncos, the Lakers, and the NBA as a whole. I want to create a space where I cover topics that I like to discuss with people, you guys, who want to listen and comment. This is to start conversations and listen to topics you all want me to look into and give my thoughts on. In this podcast, we're going to cover a range of topics like free agency, recaps, draft prospects, who gets drafted, record predictions, and weekly recaps of the NFL games. If you want to follow me on Instagram or X, my handles are the Solo Sideline. Please follow me there. I definitely engage with the audience and fans, and I'll comment on any conversations that you guys want me to talk about and points I'm passionate about. This podcast is all sports, no fluff. And without further ado, here we go with episode 1 of the Solo Sideline with Conor. I'm going to start out here at free agency. Before even starting this topic, though, I want to congratulate the Seahawks on winning the Super Bowl. The Patriots, let's be honest, were frauds. They shouldn't have been there. If Bo Nix were healthy, Denver would have won that game, been in the Super Bowl. Do I think Denver would have won the Super Bowl? Probably not, but I think it would have definitely been a closer game. But hats off to Seattle for winning the Super Bowl. I went to the parade. It was awesome. All right. So both Denver and Seattle had very low-key free agencies. The splashiest move for Denver was the Jalen Waddle trade, and we'll go into depth there later on in a different episode. The biggest move for Seattle was the Jackson Smith and Jigba extension and then re-signing Rashid Shaheed. The lack of impact moves by Denver was a result of getting a chunk of extensions done last season. And basically, they ran it back, which is a term Sean Payton really dislikes. But the extensions that Denver did were really key to having the team that they fielded last season and then going to be the same team that they field this year with some key additions here and there, aka the Jalen Waddle trade. They were in on a few free agents, and I just don't think they had the budget for them. Travis Etienne was one, but he decided to go back to where he grew up, and which is New Orleans. And they have to keep some money available for the Bo Nix extension that's coming up in a couple seasons. He's eligible for an extension after this season, and he's definitely due a big pay raise based on his last 2 years. His last 2 years, he led Denver to the playoffs. He ended the drought last 2 seasons ago when they got wrecked by Buffalo, and then he led them to the number 1 seed in the AFC and hosted Buffalo and actually beat Josh Allen in a head-to-head matchup. Now, Bo Nix has benefited from a great defense, and I think Bo Nix is definitely a kind of guy who will be more like on the Tom Brady path, maybe, where he doesn't take the highest market-setting contract, but actually takes below market, which then allows Denver some flexibility to pay maybe offensive weapons for Bo Nix or defensive players to keep the defense pretty elite. But we'll see. I mean, I'm always for players getting paid, and when it's time for contracts, players do get paid, and I'm all for that. So now Seattle, on the other hand, lost a lot of free agents, and that comes with after winning any Super Bowl. I think the only team that kept a lot of their starters was Tampa Bay after Tom Brady went there and actually won the Super Bowl. But they kept their special teams ace, Rashid Shaheed, and they ended up losing Ken Walker, and that he was a big reason the offense was really good. I think part of that was the Zach Charbonnet injury, because Seattle typically doesn't like a bell cow running back. They like to split time, and with Charbonnet going down, it really just was the Ken Walker show. And I think Ken Walker really flourished with that opportunity and ran with it, no pun intended. But congrats for Ken Walker getting a really big contract from the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think that really will help the Chiefs' ground game because they didn't really have a ground game. It was Kareem Hunt who would fall forward for about 3 yards, and I think Mahomes was a leading rusher for them for most games. And you can't really ask your all-world talent quarterback to do that every game in and game out. It can lead to injuries, and that's what happened. Mahomes got injured. Not saying that's due to the ground game, but he took a lot of hits, more hits than he's probably used to. Then Leonard Williams will also be a free agent for Seattle after this year, and he made a huge impact on the D-line after they traded for him last year. He's a player I can definitely see Seattle extending because their D-line was a weakness for years after the Legion of Boom. They couldn't consistently get to the quarterback. They couldn't consistently stop the run, so teams would be able to run on them, control the ball, and control the game. Another extension opportunity will be Devin Witherspoon, who I think is definitely going to be extended because he's a lockdown corner, and that's hard to come by. Now the league is really a passing league, and that's due to fantasy football, fans wanting high-scoring affairs. So having a number one corner that can lock down a number one receiver is great. They really take away half the field or that number one guy. Now we're going to focus on the draft. With Seattle having the Zach Charbonnet injury and Ken Walker leaving in free agency, that puts Seattle in a big position to draft a running back. I don't know if they'll draft one at number 32 overall. If they did, it would probably be Jadarian Price. And the only advantage of doing that would be having the fifth-year option. And having that fifth-year option for any player is huge, mostly for quarterbacks or pass rushers. For running backs, you can have a cost-controlled, low-cost player at a position where typically the players get run into the ground and then discarded. So maybe they spend their first round pick on Jadarian Price, but I definitely could see them going running back in round 2 or 3. However, they only have 4 picks in this year's draft, so I know John Schneider's already said he's open to trading down to get more picks, because with only 4 picks in the whole draft, you don't have a lot of ammo to fill the holes, and free agency is really over. You have a few free agents like Najee Harris who can come in and fill that hole, but he's coming off an injury of his own. But Seattle does have a history of drafting running backs early on. They did it in the first round with Rashid Penny in 2018. They also drafted Ken Walker in the second round in 2022. And then a year later, actually drafted Charbonnet in the second round. Point being, they really like running backs. They'll take one. So we'll see what happens. Going back to an earlier point, Seattle only has the 4 picks. They have the 32nd overall pick, which is the last pick in round 1, the last pick in round 2, the 64th. They have the 96th overall pick, and then 1 pick in the 6th round, which is 188th overall. That's not a lot of ammo to target their positions of needs. And their needs, running back, we've already discussed, pass rusher or edge, and corner. I could definitely see them going corner in the first round instead of running back because, like I said earlier, it's a pass-happy league, and you're going to need corners, and they're in a division with Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Matt Stafford loves to sling the ball, Kyron Williams also receives the ball out of the backfield, and their tight ends are pretty good. The Cardinals, they have Marvin Harrison Jr., but they don't really have a quarterback, so maybe not a huge threat there, but Trey McBride, huge receiving threat, pretty good tight end. And then with the Niners, it doesn't even matter who the Niners really have. However, Kyle Shanahan gets the best out of his players. He's creative. Christian McCaffrey receives the ball, George Kittle, and whoever their receivers are. But the Niners are always a scary threat. On top of that, whoever comes out of the AFC will probably have a decent receiver as well. So definitely can see them going corner because you need to have coverage on the back end of the defense. I've heard that this draft isn't deep at running back, especially not as deep as last year. And that's pushing running backs down the draft board to the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, which really is the running backs after Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Mike Washington. And Mike Washington's included not due to his fumble issues, but because he had a great combine performance, blazing speed. Speed really kills in the NFL. Denver's approach to the draft will be slightly different. Since they traded for Jalen Waddle, they don't have a first or a third round pick this year. Their first pick is at the end of round 2, which is pick 62. Then they have 2 in the 4th, and then a 5th round pick, and then 3 in the 7th round, including the last pick of the draft, which everyone calls Mr. Irrelevant. Denver has a pretty complete roster, but still has some needs to draft with their draft capital. The positions they should target are inside linebacker, tight end, running back, offensive line, and defensive line. Now, that sounds like a lot of positions, but really it's all for depth because they already have starting inside linebackers that they re-signed, Alex Singleton and Justin Strnad. Tight end, they have returning tight end Evan Ingram. They re-signed Adam Troutman. Defensive line, they drafted Savion Jones in the 3rd round last year to replace JFM. And running back, they re-signed J.K. Dobbins. They drafted R.J. Harvey in the 2nd round last year. Offensive line, they had the number 1 offensive line last year. And guess what? They're all returning. So it's really for depth pieces and maybe an impact starter here or there, but it's really not for immediate needs. Now, however, I think Denver's, with their first overall pick in the 2nd round, I think Denver's going to go inside linebacker or tight end. As I said just now, they drafted Savion Jones last year in the 3rd round to replace Sean Franklin Myers, and they've already openly said to the public and behind closed doors that they love J.K. Dobbins. They acknowledge that his injury was a freak injury. They don't think he's injury prone. However, he does get injured all the time. Hasn't played a full season, I don't think. But they've also consistently said they need to get better in the run game. And that's only going to help their offense not get stagnant, help Bo Nix, who's entering his 3rd year, who hasn't really had a reliable run game week in and week out. But with the running backs being pushed down to the 3rd or 4th round, they can maybe trade into the 3rd using one of their early 4th round picks. Draft a guy, maybe a Jonah Coleman, a Emmett Johnson, someone who can come in there, be a backup behind JK, gonna get some opportunities. JK's probably gonna get banged up, dinged up, and RJ Harvey's more of a receiving back or a scat back. So I could definitely see running back being one of their first picks, not the first pick. I think it would be tight end or inside linebacker. And the first round of the draft starts tomorrow, Thursday, April 23rd. And next week, we're going to talk about the draft results, what the Seahawks and the Broncos did with their selections. And it really comes down to what teams do. Coaches, GMs, whoever can speak to the public and say one thing, and then their actions in the draft or free agency or even a trade market really signals what they mean. And it comes down to creating smoke screens. The Broncos openly came out and said, we love our running back room. We love JK. And let's say pick 62 overall for Denver, they somehow get Jadarian Price. Well, that means JK's probably on a 1-year deal. He's not going to come back after this season, and they're not fully sold on RJ Harvey. So it just depends on what a team does. So I would rather look at what a team does rather than what they say. All right, now we're going to pivot over to the NBA. And the NBA playoffs kicked off, and the most interesting matchup to me is the Lakers-Rockets, and not just because I'm a LeBron fan. It's going to be probably one of the few last battles we see of Kevin Durant versus LeBron. LeBron's going up there in age. He's 41. KD's also not very young and spry anymore. So we'll see what happens. The Lakers are up, actually, in that series 2-0. LeBron has carried the Lakers without Austin Reeves and without Luka to 2 wins to 0 losses against the Rockets. And now the series goes back to Houston. And fun fact for all y'all, LeBron-led teams, when they've had a 2-game lead, so either 2-0 or 3-1, his record, 24-0. He has never lost a series after having a 2-game lead. So we're going to see what happens, but I think last night's game was a must-win game for Houston, and they didn't win. I think LeBron's going to pull this out, win this series, and the reward for making it to round 2, facing Oklahoma City Thunder, the defending champs, the number 1 seed in the West. I don't think LeBron, Luka, Austin Reeves, even if Luka and Reeves gets healthy and comes back, is going to win that matchup. I think OKC is going to beat, maybe even steamroll the Lakers and march maybe going back to the finals for the second consecutive year. And maybe be the first back-to-back champions that we've had in a long time. I think it's been 10 years since we've had back-to-back champs in the NBA. Now, I think the Nuggets or the Spurs could upset OKC. The Spurs have their own issues right now. Victor Wembanyama fell on the court, got a concussion, probably going to miss a few games in their series against the Trailblazers, and that series is now matched up 1-1, going back to Portland. And it's both two young teams, so we'll see what happens there. The Nuggets, of course, have Joker, and we'll see if they can get past Minnesota with a banged-up Anthony Edwards. If so, I think the Nuggets are a serious threat because the Nuggets actually beat OKC to end the season in back-to-back games, which were against their backups, but it filled them with confidence that they can go up against the champs and win. So the East will come down to Boston and Detroit, and I think Boston's going to come out on top. They're just a deeper, better, and more experienced team than any team in the East. They have championship pedigree. They got Jason Tatum back. He doesn't seem like he's really missed a beat. And if he has, Jaylen Brown's carried the team this year, has shown that he can carry the load. So I think Boston's definitely just head and shoulders above anyone in the East. I think Boston's going to be in the NBA Finals facing probably OKC, but maybe the Nuggets or the Spurs. But I think it's going to be an OKC-Boston Finals. And I think that will be very interesting to see who actually comes out on top because both teams are deep. Both teams have the championship pedigree. Both teams have the experience. It might just come down to coaching. And Mazzulla's a heck of a coach. Didn't think I was going to say that when he took over for Ime Udoka, but Mazzulla showed that he can coach. Plus, he also has a really good team. All right. On a different topic, but still in the NBA, is the 65-game rule. The NBA needs to change that rule. If those who don't know, the 65-game rule is a rule in the NBA where players have to play a minimum of 65 games to be eligible for the end-of-the-year awards, such as the MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, All-NBA teams, etc. But they don't just have to play 65 games. The player must play a minimum of 20 minutes in those games. They can't start the game, do the tip-off, and then immediately sub out and be done for the night. Now, the NFL doesn't have that rule. For players to play consecutive games and keep that sort of Iron Man record alive, a player can start the game, take a snap, be done for the game, and they played that game. It's marked off in history as they started and played that game. Think Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Not to pick on them, but Josh Allen will start Week 18 meaningless games, take the first snap, hand the ball off, sub out, and the backup comes in and finishes the rest of the game, all the other offensive snaps, minus the first one. That's to keep his Iron Man streak alive. NBA, you cannot do that and count towards playing the game for the 65-game rule. I think it needs to be changed back to how the NBA was before this latest collective bargaining agreement took place. Let the voters use logic, common sense when voting. Players like Cade Cunningham and Luka Doncic, for example, were penalized this year and missed that criteria, that mark of 65 games. Luka had his suspension due to too many technical fouls. He missed a couple games for the birth of his child in a different country. Cade Cunningham, way different situation. He was playing amazing. The Pistons had the number 1 seed in the East, still do, and a large part of it was Cade, and then he got a collapsed lung and missed the rest of the season and didn't hit that criteria for the 65 game mark. Now, both players appealed that decision from the NBA and actually won their appeal, and so they're eligible for awards. Now, another player, Anthony Edwards of the Timberwolves, suffered a few setbacks with injuries throughout the year. He appealed the 65 game rule because he didn't meet the criteria, and his appeal was actually denied. So it's really hit and miss if your appeal is going to be granted or denied. But it's really unfortunate that the NBA has to make that 65 game rule. And on top of that, the 20-minute mark for that. And it just hurts players who actually suffer freak injuries. If a player sits out for a lot of games due to load management or whatever other reason that's not really injury related, they just shouldn't be eligible for awards. And I think the voters would realize that and recognize it and vote accordingly. All right, now we're going to wrap up the podcast here. And this brings us to the end of the episode of the first episode of the Solo Sideline. I hope you enjoyed your time listening to me talk sports, share my opinions and thoughts with you all. Don't forget to click subscribe on Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, and other streaming services. You can find me on my socials again at the Solo Sideline. Appreciate a follow here and there on Twitter and Instagram. I definitely interact with anyone who follows me and comments, and I hope you tune in next week for the next episode. Thank you.